They said that without the family, she wouldn't last 6 months, that she'd come back asking for help. That pride would break her first. At the last dinner, nobody shouted, nobody argued. The sentence came out cold, almost polite. "You really think you can do it alone?" She just stood up, grabbed her purse and walked out. No promises, no threats, no drama. What nobody noticed that night is they weren't pushing out someone weak. They were losing the only person who kept everything standing quietly. Years later, when they finally tried to find her, it wasn't her success that destroyed them. It was something worse. She didn't need them anymore. For years, she was the safe one in the family, the one who fixed things, smoothed conflicts, organized birthdays, paid bills when someone forgot, the one who carried everyone's stress like it was her job. She was never the most praised, never the priority, just reliable, convenient. So when she chose to live on her own terms, there was no applause, only quiet bets placed against her. In their minds, independence was arrogance. Life would teach her. Reality would put her back in her place. What they didn't know was she'd been learning to live without approval for a long time. This is the story of a woman who didn't come back to get revenge. She didn't expose anyone. She didn't beg for recognition. She simply built a life so solid that her absence became the loudest sentence. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and whether you've ever felt like someone was waiting for you to fail. Stay to the end, subscribe and like, because some victories don't make noise, but they echo forever. Her name was Nora Harlan, and if you asked her family who she was, they'd give you a list of roles. Never a person. The responsible one, the calm one, the peacemaker, the one who handles things. It sounded like praise until you realized it was a trap. Nora learned early that love in her house didn't arrive as warmth. It arrived as need. People didn't ask how she was. They asked what she could do. And the worst part was, it happened so quietly she almost didn't notice it becoming her identity. On Mondays, she called her grandmother to check her medication schedule because her uncle never had time. On Wednesdays, she drove across town to drop off groceries for her mother, who always forgot to shop until the fridge was empty, then sighed like Nora was the only stable thing left in the world. On Fridays, she stayed up past midnight, helping her younger brother, Ethan, rewrite resumes he wouldn't submit anyway. And every time Nora did these things, the family acted like it was normal, like gravity, like the sun coming up. No one thanked gravity. At family gatherings, Nora was the one scanning the room like a silent security system. She could tell when her mother's smile was too tight, when her aunt's laugh was a warning, when her brother was about to pick a fight just to feel alive. She didn't enjoy any of it. She just prevented disasters, and when she prevented them successfully, no one noticed, because nothing happened. That was Nora's curse. Her value was invisible. The smallest humiliations were the worst because they were packaged as jokes. Deniable, harmless, light. Her aunt would say, "Nora's always been so serious. God forbid she has fun." Her mother would add, "She's like a little old lady trapped in a young body." And everyone would laugh like it was affectionate. If Nora didn't laugh, they'd tilt their heads and say, "Oh my God, you're too sensitive." There it was, the family's favorite spell, a phrase that turned pain into her flaw. When Nora started working full-time, her mother began calling her during the day with emergencies that weren't emergencies. "I can't find the insurance card. I don't know what this letter means. Your uncle is being difficult again." Nora would step into stairwells to take the calls, voice low so co-workers wouldn't hear the tremor of exhaustion. She'd solve the problem in minutes, then return to her desk, hands still shaking slightly, like she'd just disarmed a bomb no one knew existed. At night, she'd lie in bed with her phone face down, heart still buzzing like she was on standby for a family crisis that never ended. And here's what nobody tells you about being the strong one. You don't become strong because you're fearless. You become strong because nobody leaves you room to be anything else. Nora didn't realize how deep it had gone until one Sunday at her mother's house when her brother showed up furious. Late rent, again, job lost, again, someone else's fault, again. He stormed into the kitchen and threw his keys onto the counter so hard they clanged. "This is unbelievable," Ethan snapped. "I'm drowning and nobody cares." Nora's mother looked at Nora instantly, like an automatic reflex. "Nora, can you talk to him?" Nora paused, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she felt something inside her finally get tired of being assigned. Ethan kept ranting. Her mother kept watching her expectantly. Her aunt was already half smiling, waiting for Nora to fix it, like it was entertainment. Nora noticed her own hands. They were clenched into fists at her sides. She thought, I haven't even asked what I need in years. Instead, she heard her own voice come out calm. Ethan, what exactly do you want from us right now? Her brother scoffed. Don't start with that therapy talk. I'm not, Nora said steady. I'm asking what you want. He rolled his eyes. I want support, like normal families give. Nora's mother jumped in quickly, sharp and defensive. We do support you. Nora supports you. The sentence hit Nora like cold water. Not we, not I, Nora. Her mother had outsourced her responsibility so long it didn't even register as wrong. Nora looked at her mother, and for the first time she didn't see a parent. She saw a woman who had grown comfortable letting her daughter become a human shock absorber. Mum, Nora said quietly, why is it always me? Her mother blinked as if Nora had spoken a foreign language. What do you mean? Nora felt heat rise behind her eyes. Not tears, not yet. Something else. A pressure. I mean, why is the family's stability always my job? Nora asked. Why am I the one who calls, schedules, pays, mediates, fixes, apologizes and absorbs? Her aunt laughed nervously. Oh my God, here we go. Nora's having her moment. Nora turned to her aunt. What moment is that? Her aunt shrugged. The dramatic one. Nora exhaled slowly. I've never screamed at anyone in this family. I've never embarrassed anyone. I've never walked out. I've never even told you when you've hurt me. Her mother's face tightened. Nora, don't do this. That phrase. Another spell, don't do this. As if truth was a messy habit Nora should control. Nora's voice didn't rise. That was the terrifying part. She was calm enough to see everything clearly. I'm doing it because I'm finally paying attention, she said. Every time something breaks, you look at me like I'm the glue, but you don't treat glue like a person. You treat it like something you use. Ethan scoffed again. So what? You're the victim now. Nora looked at him, and she realized something painful. They weren't cruel because they hated her. They were careless because they expected her to stay. That entitlement was worse than hatred. It meant they didn't even believe she could leave. Nora glanced around the kitchen. She knew where the extra keys were. She knew the Wi-Fi password. She knew every bill date and every family secret. She knew which cabinets held the emergency money. She knew what her mother's "I'm fine" really meant. And suddenly she saw it all from the outside. They didn't value her. They depended on her. And those are not the same thing. Nora picked up her purse slowly. Not dramatically. Just like someone standing up from a chair after a meeting that ended. Her mother's eyes widened. Where are you going? Nora paused at the doorway. Her voice stayed soft, almost gentle. I'm going to see what happens when I'm not the solution. Her aunt laughed again, but it sounded thin this time. Oh, please, you'll be back. You always come back. Nora didn't answer. She walked out into the daylight, feeling her lungs take in air that wasn't laced with obligation. And as she drove away, one thought settled in her chest. Quiet, final, unavoidable. If she left, they wouldn't even know what she really did. That night, Nora didn't send the usual apology text. She didn't check in. She didn't smooth things over. And for the first time, the family's silence wasn't peaceful. It was uncertain. Because deep down they were starting to realize something. They didn't just have a daughter. They had a foundation. And foundations don't announce when they're about to crack. The dinner wasn't supposed to be a confrontation. That was the first lie. Nora almost didn't go. She stood in her apartment doorway with her keys in her hand, staring at the phone like it might bite her. Her mother had texted that morning. Family dinner tonight. Don't be late. We need to talk like adults. Like adults always meant like you'll stay quiet. Nora had learned to hear the code beneath their words. Still, a part of her, old, trained, obedient, wanted to prove she was reasonable. Wanted to prove she wasn't the dramatic one. So she went. Her mother's house smelled like roasted chicken and lemon cleaner. Everything looked perfect in the way perfection is used as a weapon. The table was set like a holiday, even though it wasn't a holiday. Candles, cloth napkins, the nice plates, the kind of staging that said, "We're not the problem, you are." When Nora walked in, her aunt was already there, swirling wine like she owned the place. Ethan sat slouched in his chair, phone in hand, face irritated by the mere existence of other people. Her Uncle Greg leaned against the counter, grinning at something on the TV, and her mother stood at the stove like a host on a talk show, smiling too brightly. "There she is," her mother said, voice cheerful. "Look who decided to grace us." Nora felt the first pinch in her chest. Not an insult, not even loud, just the old familiar tone, the one that made her feel like she owed them for being present. Nora set her purse on a chair. "Hi." Her mother kissed her cheek quickly, then turned to the others. "See, she came. I told you she would." Ethan snorted. "She always comes. She can't help it." Nora glanced at him. He didn't even look up from his phone. The dinner started with small talk that wasn't small. Every question had a hook in it. Every laugh had a target. "How's work?" her mother asked. "Busy," Nora answered. Her aunt smiled. "Busy is good. Keeps you from overthinking everything." Nora's fingers tightened around her water glass. Her Uncle Greg added, "Still living alone?" "Yes." He made a face like she'd confessed to a crime. "Must be lonely. I don't know how you do it. I'd go crazy." Nora smiled politely. "I like the quiet." "Oh, she likes the quiet," her aunt mimicked, laughing. "That's because nobody in her apartment challenges her." Nora stayed still. She could feel the setup forming, like a storm building pressure. Her mother served dinner, then sat at the head of the table like a judge in her own courtroom. The candles flickered. The chicken steamed. Silverware clinked. Everything looked warm while the air felt sharp. Then her mother cleared her throat. "So," she said, voice suddenly serious, "we need to address what happened last week." Nora didn't flinch. "Okay." Her aunt's smile widened. Ethan's phone finally lowered. Her mother continued, "You embarrassed us." Nora blinked slowly. "By asking why everything falls on me?" Greg shrugged. "You made it a big deal." "It is a big deal," Nora said calmly. Her mother sighed like Nora was a child arguing bedtime. "You've always been like this, taking things personally, acting like we're attacking you." Nora's heart beat once, hard. There it was again. "If you're hurt, it's your fault for feeling." Her aunt chimed in. "Honestly, Nora, you act like you're the only one with responsibilities." Nora looked around the table, and for a second she saw it in snapshots. Her mother waiting to be rescued, Ethan waiting to be excused, her aunt waiting to be entertained, Greg waiting to coast, and Nora, expected to carry all of them without making noise. Nora set her fork down. "I'm not saying you don't have responsibilities," she said. "I'm saying you've made mine mandatory." Her mother's lips tightened. "Mandatory? We're family. That's what family does." Nora nodded once, slowly. "Family supports each other." "Yes, but that's not what this is." Her aunt rolled her eyes. "Here we go." Nora didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She kept it clean, honest, direct. "When Ethan needs money, you call me. When you need paperwork done, you call me. When Grandma needs help, you call me. When anyone's upset, you send them to me like I'm a therapist on payroll." Her mother scoffed. "Oh, please, you're exaggerating." Nora looked her mother straight in the eye. "Name one thing I asked from you in the last year," Nora said softly. "One time I needed help, and you showed up." Silence. Not guilty silence. Not thoughtful silence. The kind of silence that happens when people realize the truth is accurate. Ethan broke it first, smirking. "Maybe you don't ask because you like being the hero." That landed like a slap. Nora felt the heat rise behind her eyes, but she didn't blink. She refused to give them the satisfaction of watching her crumble. She turned her head toward him, calm as ice. "I don't like being the hero," she said. "I like being safe." Ethan laughed. "Safe from what?" Nora's voice dropped slightly. "From the guilt you all hand me when I say no." Her aunt waved her hand dismissively. "This is what we mean. You're always making it deep. It's a simple family dinner and you're turning it into some trauma speech." Her mother leaned forward, smile gone. "Nora," she said, "you're acting like you're better than us." Nora's stomach tightened. That was the accusation they always used when she changed the rules. "You think you're better." Nora shook her head gently. "I don't think I'm better," she said. "I think I'm tired." Her mother stared at her like she'd spoken blasphemy. "Tired?" she repeated. "Of what? You don't even have kids." Ethan snorted. "Exactly." Nora's pulse stayed steady. She felt something inside her snap into clarity. They couldn't see her effort because it wasn't visible enough to them. Her labor was emotional, administrative, invisible, the kind that keeps families from collapsing but never earns applause. Her mother's voice became quiet and sharp. "Let's be honest," she said. "You wouldn't survive without us. You need the family." Nora blinked once. Greg nodded like it was common sense. "Yeah. You think you can do it alone? The world doesn't care about you like we do." Her aunt leaned in with a pitying smile. "You'll come back. You always do. 6 months. Tops." Nora looked at the faces around the table. None of them looked worried about losing her. They looked confident, like they'd already placed the bet. And then came the sentence. cold, almost polite, delivered like a final stamp on a document. Her mother said it calmly. "You really think you can do it alone?" Nora didn't answer right away. Not because she didn't have an answer, because she understood something in that moment that changed everything. They weren't asking out of concern. They were asking because they wanted her to fail. Failure would prove their narrative. Failure would pull her back into her role. Failure would restore their comfort. Nora looked down at her plate, then slowly pushed her chair back. The sound of the chair legs scraping the floor cut through the candlelit room like a blade. Everyone froze. Her aunt's eyebrows rose. "Are you seriously doing this again?" Nora stood. She didn't slam anything. She didn't cry. She didn't threaten. She picked up her purse. Her mother's voice sharpened, panicked just enough to show the crack beneath her control. "Nora, sit down." Nora looked at her mother, and her voice came out calm, almost gentle. "I already did my part." Ethan scoffed. "Here comes the silent treatment." Nora didn't respond to him. She didn't give him the power of reaction. She walked to the doorway. Her aunt called after her, laughing to hide the discomfort. "Go ahead. Run away. You'll be back when reality hits." Nora paused at the door, not turning around. She said only one sentence. "Don't wait up." Then she walked out into the night air, like someone stepping out of a locked room. No drama, no performance, just a clean exit. And inside that dining room where they thought they'd won because she didn't fight, something began to shift. Because Nora's silence wasn't surrender, it was distance. And distance, real distance, has a terrifying effect on people who only felt powerful because you were close enough to control. That night, Nora didn't send an apology text. She didn't explain herself. She didn't soften the edges, and the family celebrated, quietly, like they'd just watched her prove their point. But what they didn't understand was that Nora's silence wasn't weakness. It was the first step of a life they would never be part of again. And the fall she endured next happened where none of them could see. If independence were glamorous, Nora would have failed immediately. That's the part no one tells you. Leaving doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like free fall, the kind where your stomach floats and your mind scrambles for something familiar to grab onto. The first weeks after that dinner were quiet in a way Nora wasn't prepared for. No one called. No one texted. No emergencies appeared on her phone like clockwork. At first, the silence felt like relief. Then it turned into something heavier. Loneliness doesn't announce itself loudly. It settles. It waits until the apartment lights are off, until the dishes are done, until there's nothing left to distract you from your own thoughts. Nora sat on her couch some nights, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the dark screen of her phone, not because she wanted to call them, but because a lifetime of conditioning had taught her that she was the one who checked in first. She didn't, and the world didn't end. But something else began. The cost of standing alone money became tighter, faster than she expected. When Nora stopped acting as the family's safety net, she also stopped benefiting from their informal one. No shared resources, no emergency backups, no "we'll figure it out together." Just her. Her job paid the bills, but barely. Unexpected expenses hit harder now. A car repair, a medical copay, a broken laptop charger that suddenly felt like a crisis. She picked up extra shifts, took freelance work at night, said yes to projects she didn't love because survival doesn't ask about passion, it asks about persistence. Some nights, she fell asleep at her desk. Other nights, she lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, wondering if everyone else felt this afraid and just hid it better. There were moments, real ones, when she almost broke, not dramatically, quietly. Like the night she sat on the kitchen floor at 2 a.m., back against the cabinet, tears rolling silently because she'd made a mistake on a payment and the overdraft fee felt like proof that her family was right. You can't do this alone. The thought came uninvited, sharp and cruel. Her phone was in her hand before she realized it. Her mother's contact stared back at her from the screen. Nora's thumb hovered. This was the moment they had predicted, the moment they were waiting for, the moment she would come to her senses and return to the role they had prepared for her. She closed her eyes. Then she locked the phone and placed it face down, not because she wasn't hurting, but because she understood something new. Asking them for help wouldn't save her. It would erase her progress. So she cried, she breathed, she stood up, and she kept going. The work no one applauded Nora's life during that period wouldn't make a montage. There were no dramatic breakthroughs, no sudden success stories, No moment where everything clicked into place, just repetition. Wake up, work, come home, eat something small, sleep, repeat. She took a second job answering customer emails late at night. No one knew her name. No one cared about her background. She was just another voice behind a screen. And strangely, that anonymity taught her something powerful. She didn't need to perform anymore. There was no one to impress, no one to reassure, no one to stabilize. She could simply exist. The quiet struggle reshaped her. It stripped away the reflex to explain herself, to justify her choices, to preemptively defend decisions no one had asked about. She stopped telling people why she lived alone, stopped apologizing for being busy, stopped translating her boundaries into something palatable. When co-workers asked, "Why don't you see your family more?" she answered calmly, "We're not close." No story, no footnote, no guilt. And each time she said it, something inside her loosened. Learning to sit with fear. Fear didn't disappear. It just changed shape. It wasn't the sharp panic of family conflict anymore. It was the low hum of uncertainty, the fear of getting sick with no one to call, the fear of failing quietly, the fear of becoming invisible in a different way. But Nora learned something essential. Fear loses power when you stop outsourcing your courage. She began doing things alone, small things at first, going to movies by herself, taking walks without headphones, eating at a cafe without scrolling. At first it felt awkward, like everyone was watching her, judging her. They weren't. Most people were too busy living their own lives to notice. That realization hit her harder than anything her family had ever said. The world wasn't waiting to punish her. It was indifferent. And indifference, she learned, could be peaceful. The strength that grows quietly. Months passed. The family's jokes about her coming back faded into memory. Not because they apologized, but because Nora stopped replaying them. She learned how to budget with precision, how to plan months ahead, how to say no without explanation. She learned that exhaustion doesn't mean failure, it means effort. She learned that solitude can be grounding when it's chosen. And most importantly, she learned something her family never had to: self-trust. When something went wrong, she didn't panic. She adjusted. When she made a mistake, she corrected it. When she felt lost, she didn't run. She waited. She built competence the way people build muscle, quietly, painfully, without applause. And while her family laughed at old stories, convinced she'd learn her lesson, Nora was learning something else entirely. The shift they never saw. One evening, nearly a year after that dinner, Nora sat at her small kitchen table reviewing a contract for a new role. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. Better pay, clear boundaries, respect baked into the structure. She signed it slowly, not triumphantly, not emotionally, just steadily. When she leaned back in her chair, a realization washed over her. Not like fireworks, but like warmth. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was standing, and she didn't feel the urge to tell anyone. That was the strangest part. The old Nora would have shared the news, explained it, framed it as reassurance. "See, I'm okay, you don't need to worry." But this Nora didn't need witnesses. She closed her laptop and poured herself a glass of water. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet transformation happening in one small apartment. And miles away, around familiar tables and routines, her family continued as they always had. Certain that Nora's silence meant struggle. They joked about her stubbornness. They shook their heads at her pride. They waited for the call. What they didn't know, what they would never know, was that while they were laughing, Nora was learning something they never had to learn: how to build a life without leaning on anyone who expected her to break. By the time the family stopped joking about her return, Nora had stopped thinking about returning at all, because somewhere in the quiet, unshared hours of survival, she'd crossed an invisible line. She no longer needed approval to feel real. She no longer needed validation to move forward. And the growth that came next was so silent, so steady, so unannounced, that by the time anyone noticed, it was already irreversible. Nora's life didn't change all at once. There was no before and after moment anyone could point to. No announcement, no victory post, no subtle message meant to be seen by the right people. It changed the way mountains erode, slowly, quietly, and permanently. She stopped measuring time by crises and started measuring it by consistency, by the calm rhythm of days that didn't require emotional triage, by mornings that began without a knot in her stomach, wondering who would need her next. Her new job wasn't glamorous, but it respected her boundaries. Clear hours, clear expectations, no late-night emergencies, disguised as favors. For the first time in her adult life, Nora could plan a week without accounting for someone else's chaos. That alone felt radical. She noticed the change in small ways first. She stopped flinching when her phone buzzed, stopped rehearsing explanations before conversations, stopped anticipating disappointment as the default outcome. When something went wrong, she didn't spiral. She adjusted. When something went right, she didn't rush to share it. That was new. The quiet rebuild. Nora began investing in things that wouldn't impress anyone else. A better mattress, because sleep mattered now. A standing desk, because her body deserved care. Groceries chosen for nourishment, not convenience. She cooked more. Simple meals, repetitive meals. Meals no one commented on or judged. The absence of commentary was healing. She reorganized her apartment, not to make it presentable, but to make it peaceful. She got rid of items tied to guilt, gifts she never liked, clothes she wore to please others, paperwork she'd kept because someone might need it. Each discarded object felt like a small declaration. This is no longer my responsibility. She also began therapy, not because she was broken, but because she was finally allowed to be honest without being interrupted. In those sessions, she named things she'd never said out loud. I learned early that love was conditional. I was praised for endurance, not joy. I don't know who I am without being needed. Her therapist didn't rush to fix her. She let the truth breathe. And in that breathing space, Nora discovered something quietly devastating. She had confused usefulness with worth for most of her life. Success without witnesses. Months turned into years. Nora's career grew, not explosively, but reliably. She earned trust through precision, not performance. People sought her out because she delivered, not because she rescued. She was promoted twice without lobbying for it. When her manager told her, "You're someone people feel safe relying on, but you don't burn yourself out," Nora felt something close to disbelief. She had never heard that second part before. Her finances stabilized. She built savings, emergency funds, long-term plans. She learned how to say no at work the same way she had learned to say no in her personal life. Calmly, without apology. "I can't take that on right now. That's outside my role. I'll need more time." And the world didn't collapse. In fact, it adjusted. That was the most shocking lesson of all. The end of explaining one afternoon, a co-worker casually asked, "So what does your family think about all this?" Nora paused, then shrugged. "I don't really discuss my life with them." There was no bitterness in her voice, no drama, just a statement of fact. The co-worker nodded, accepting it without prying. Nora walked back to her desk feeling lighter. She realized she hadn't rehearsed that sentence beforehand. She hadn't needed to. She stopped explaining herself to people who weren't invested in her well-being. She stopped translating her boundaries into language others would find comfortable. She didn't announce her independence. She embodied it. The silence that became power. Social media never saw her growth. There were no posts about healing or cutting off toxic people. No inspirational quotes. No curated version of her resilience. Nora understood something most people miss. Real change doesn't seek witnesses. It seeks permanence. Her family never saw the apartment upgrade, never saw the promotions, never saw the bank balance, never saw the calm. And that absence, intentional, complete, wasn't punishment. It was protection. She no longer needed to be seen by people who had only valued her when she was exhausted. The moment it became irreversible. One evening, nearly 3 years after she'd walked out of that dinner, Nora received a notification she almost ignored. A calendar reminder. Grandma's birthday. For a brief moment, muscle memory kicked in. She pictured the cake she used to order, the gift she'd always chosen, the speech she'd helped someone else prepare. Then she closed the reminder, not in anger, in clarity. She sat with the feeling that followed. Not guilt, not relief, but neutrality. That's when she knew. There was no pull anymore, no sense of obligation dragging her backward, no internal argument, no inner voice insisting she prove something. The door wasn't slammed, it had simply closed. What they didn't see. While Nora built a life defined by quiet competence and emotional autonomy, her family continued operating on the assumption that she was finding herself. A phase, a rebellion, a lesson life would teach her. They told the story often, especially to each other. She's stubborn, just like her father. She'll realize family is all you have. She'll be back when she needs something. They didn't notice how often things started going wrong. They didn't notice the increased tension, the miscommunications, the unresolved arguments. They didn't notice that no one was smoothing things over anymore, because Nora had done that invisibly. And when invisible labor disappears, people don't grieve the person. They grieve the comfort. The first time the family felt it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a small problem, one that should have been easy to solve, but no one knew who was supposed to handle it. And for the first time, someone asked the question out loud, wait, who used to take care of this? That's when they began to understand something unsettling. They hadn't lost a daughter. They'd lost the axis that kept everything balanced, and the emptiness she left behind was about to make itself known. The first crack was small enough to dismiss. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of ordinary day that never announces turning points. Nora's mother stood in the kitchen, staring at a stack of unopened mail, irritation tightening her mouth. "Did anyone call the insurance company?" she asked, voice sharp. Her aunt looked up from her phone. "Why would I?" "Well, someone has to," her mother snapped. "The bill is overdue." They stood there for a moment, waiting for the familiar solution to materialize. It didn't. There was no Nora stepping in, no calm voice saying, "I'll handle it," no quiet efficiency restoring order, just silence. Her mother scoffed. "Unbelievable. I can't believe she let this slide." The words came easily. Blame always did. But later that night, after the call finally got made, with confusion, hold music, and frustration, her mother felt something uncomfortable settle in her chest. It shouldn't have been that hard. Small things start to break. At first, the problems were minor. Appointments missed, paperwork misplaced, conversations spiraling into arguments instead of resolution. Ethan forgot to renew his car registration and blamed the system. Greg mishandled a payment and blamed the bank. Nora's aunt double-booked a family event and blamed bad communication. What none of them said out loud, but all of them felt, was the same thing. This used to be easier. Family gatherings grew tense in a new way. Not explosive, not dramatic, just off balance. Conversations looped without closure, conflicts lingered longer. Little resentments piled up without anyone smoothing them down. Nora's name started appearing in sentences she wasn't part of. Remember how Nora used to organize this? She would have caught that mistake. She always knew who to call. The tone wasn't grateful. It was annoyed. As if she had stopped performing a duty they never acknowledged as work. The realization they avoided. One evening, after a particularly messy argument over something trivial, Nora's aunt slammed her glass down on the table. "This family is falling apart," she snapped. Ethan laughed bitterly. "Overreacting much?" "No," she said. "We're all stepping on each other because nobody's keeping things together anymore." The room went quiet. Her mother stared at the table. Greg shifted uncomfortably. No one said Nora's name, but it hung there anyway. Her mother broke the silence sharply. "She chose this." There it was. The defense. "She walked away," her mother continued. "She wanted independence. This is what independence looks like." But even as she said it, something in her voice wavered. Independence was supposed to punish Nora. Instead, it was punishing them. The axis is gone months past, and the cracks widened. Family decisions stalled because no one wanted responsibility. Emotional conflicts escalated because no one knew how to mediate without attacking. Old grievances resurfaced, unresolved and raw. The family had relied on Nora to absorb tension so thoroughly they'd forgotten how much there was. And now the tension had nowhere to go. Her mother started sleeping poorly. Her aunt became defensive, brittle. Ethan grew more reckless, more irritable. The equilibrium they'd mistaken for normal had been quietly maintained by one person, and that person was gone. What unsettled them most wasn't Nora's absence. It was the realization that she had been the structure, not the decoration. Trying to replace her. They tried, of course. Her mother attempted to step up, but grew overwhelmed quickly. She didn't have Nora's patience or her emotional endurance. She snapped when things got complicated. Her aunt tried to take control, but without Nora's neutrality, everything felt personal. Arguments escalated fast. Ethan promised to handle things once or twice. He didn't. No one could replicate what Nora had done because what she had done wasn't a role. It was a system built on anticipation, emotional regulation, and invisible labor. And systems don't replace themselves. The first admission. It happened quietly late one night. Nora's mother sat alone in the living room, scrolling through old photos on her phone. Holidays, birthdays, smiling faces that now felt strangely distant. Nora appeared in almost every photo, not centered, not spotlighted, but present, always present. Her mother paused on one image, Nora in the background, mid-conversation, holding a plate while helping someone else. For the first time, her mother noticed something she'd never allowed herself to see. Nora looked tired, not dramatic, not angry, just worn. A thought surfaced, unwelcome and heavy. She wasn't difficult. She was exhausted. Her mother set the phone down quickly, like the realization burned. The next morning she acted as if nothing had happened. Some truths take time to sink in. The question no one wanted to ask. At the next family gathering, the tension finally cracked open. They were arguing again, over logistics, over money, over who said what. Voices rose, accusations flew, and then Ethan exploded. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "We never used to fight like this." His aunt shot back. "Yes, we did. Nora just fixed it before it got this bad." Silence slammed into the room. No one laughed. No one corrected her. The words had landed too cleanly. Ethan stared at the table. "So what? This is her fault too?" "No," his aunt said quietly. "It's ours." Her mother inhaled sharply. "We didn't ask her to do everything." Her aunt looked at her. "You didn't have to." She knew it was expected. That sentence cracked something open. Expectation without request. Dependence without gratitude. Comfort without accountability. The truth was no longer avoidable. They hadn't just lost a daughter. They had lost the axis. The empty space speaks days later. A small crisis hit. Nothing catastrophic, just significant enough to matter. A medical issue with their grandmother. Paperwork needed. Calls to be made. Everyone froze. Her mother reached for her phone instinctively, then stopped. Nora's name hovered in her contacts like a ghost. Her mother stared at it for a long moment. She didn't call, but for the first time she didn't feel angry. She felt exposed, because in that moment she understood something that unsettled her deeply. Nora hadn't left to punish them. Nora had left to survive. And now, without her, they were forced to face something they'd never learned how to handle. Their own weight. It took them years to say her name without bitterness, but eventually the thought surfaced, hesitant, uncomfortable, unavoidable. What if we were wrong? That question didn't come with solutions. It came with longing. And that longing would soon turn into something else. A message, a call, a careful attempt to reach across a distance they hadn't believed was real. Because the hardest truth they were about to learn was this. Nora hadn't left in anger. She had left in clarity. And clarity doesn't come back just because someone finally feels the loss. The first message came on a Thursday. Not on a holiday. Not on a birthday. Not on a dramatic anniversary meant to soften the ground. Just a Thursday. Nora noticed it while standing in line for coffee before work. Her phone vibrated once in her hand. She glanced down out of habit and froze. Mom. The name looked unfamiliar. Not because it was new, but because it had been unused for so long, it felt like it belonged to a different life. For a moment, Nora didn't open it. She felt nothing dramatic. No rush of anger, no spike of hope. Just a stillness, like the pause before a decision she already knew the answer to. She paid for her coffee, stepped aside, then opened the message. "Hi Nora, I hope you're doing well. I was thinking about you. Maybe we could talk sometime." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, no recognition of time past. Just a soft knock on a door they had once slammed shut. Nora read it twice, then once more. She didn't reply, not immediately. She took her coffee to a small table by the window and sat down, letting the city move around her. People rushed past with their own concerns, their own unfinished conversations. The world didn't hold its breath for family reunions, and neither did she. The old reflex, and the new one years ago, Nora would have responded instantly. She would have reassured, softened, asked questions that weren't hers to ask. "Of course, Mom. Are you okay? What's wrong?" That version of Nora had lived in constant readiness. This one didn't. She sipped her coffee slowly and checked in with herself, not emotionally but honestly. Did she want to talk? Not should. Not felt obligated. Did she want to? The answer came quietly. Not yet. So she put her phone away and went to work. When politeness replaces obligation. 2 days later, another message arrived. This time from her aunt. "Hey, stranger. Your mom mentioned you. Thought I'd check in. We miss you." Nora noticed the phrasing. We miss you. Not we're sorry. Not we were wrong. Not even how are you really. Just absence framed as nostalgia. Nora didn't feel offended. She felt detached. She waited until that evening, after dinner, after the dishes were done, after her day belonged entirely to herself. Then she replied, "Hi, I hope you're well too. Life's been busy but good. Nothing more. No invitation, no explanation, no emotional opening." The response came quickly. "That's good to hear. Maybe you could come by sometime. It's been so long." Nora stared at the screen. Here it was, the pivot point, the moment they expected gravity to pull her back. She typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, she wrote, "I'm not able to do that right now, but I appreciate you reaching out." She sent it and felt fine, not relieved, not guilty, just fine. The silence that disarms. The family didn't know what to do with this version of Nora. She wasn't angry enough to argue with. She wasn't emotional enough to manipulate. She wasn't distant enough to dismiss as cold. She was polite, calm, unavailable. That combination was unsettling. Her mother tried again a week later, this time with a phone call. Nora let it ring, not out of spite, out of choice. She returned the call the next day. "Hi, Mom," she said when her mother answered, voice steady. There was a pause on the other end, a recalibration. "Oh, Nora, hi. I didn't think you'd call back. I saw I missed you," Nora replied. "I wanted to respond when I had time." Another pause. They talked for 10 minutes about neutral things. Work, weather, a neighbor's new dog. Her mother waited for an opening that never came. No confrontation, no emotional spill, no invitation back into the old roles. When the call ended, her mother sounded unsettled. "Okay then," she said finally. "Well, take care." "You too," Nora replied. She hung up and went back to folding laundry. What they expected and what they got behind the scenes, the family compared notes. "She sounds different," her aunt said. "She didn't ask about us," Ethan muttered. "She didn't apologize," her mother added quietly. Apology was the currency they understood. Nora wasn't offering any, and that was the problem. Because without anger, they had no defense. Without blame, they had no shield. Without guilt, they had no leverage. Her calm didn't invite repair. It enforced distance, the shift in power. More attempts followed. A holiday card, a casual invite, a forwarded photo from years ago. Each time Nora responded the same way. Kind, brief, closed. She didn't rehash the past, didn't demand accountability, didn't punish. She simply didn't re-enter the system that had required her to disappear for everyone else to function. And that was devastating because systems don't fear confrontation. They fear irrelevance. The conversation that changed everything. One evening, months later, her mother called again. This time her voice was different, tired. "Nora," she said quietly, "can I ask you something?" Nora paused. "You can ask." Another pause. "Do you ever think about coming back? About being close again?" Nora didn't rush. She looked out her window at the city lights, steady, indifferent, alive. "Yes," she said honestly. "I think about the idea of family sometimes." Her mother exhaled, hopeful. "But not the way it was," Nora continued, "and not at the cost of myself." Silence. Her mother's voice cracked slightly. "We didn't know you felt that way." Nora closed her eyes, not in pain but in clarity. "I know," she said gently. "That's why I had to leave." Her mother didn't argue. She couldn't. There was nothing to push against, no anger to deflect, no accusation to deny, just truth, delivered calmly, years too late to undo. The aftermath. After that call, the family felt something new, not relief, not resolution, finality. They understood, finally, that Nora wasn't withholding herself to teach them a lesson. She was simply no longer available for the role they had assigned her, and that hurt more than rejection, because rejection implies emotion. This was acceptance, acceptance that her life was elsewhere now. The family thought the reunion, when it happened, would bring closure. They imagined tears, confessions, apologies, a reset. What they didn't anticipate was how little would actually happen on the surface, because when Nora finally stood in the same room with them again, there was no argument, no explosion, no reckoning, just something far more unsettling, the quiet realization that she didn't need to win anything from them anymore, and that would be the moment everything truly fell apart. The meeting happened on a Saturday afternoon, wrapped in circumstances no one could refuse. A funeral, not a close one. A distant relative. The kind of event families attend out of obligation rather than grief. Neutral ground. Safe enough to justify contact. Heavy enough to demand civility. When Nora received the message, she didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." The response came almost immediately. "Okay, we'll see you then." They read into those words everything they wanted. They imagined reconciliation. They imagined tears. They imagined a reckoning long delayed. They imagined they still mattered in the way they used to. The arrival. Nora arrived alone. No dramatic entrance. No hesitation. She parked, adjusted her coat and walked inside with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was. The room smelled of flowers and old wood. Soft music played. Conversations murmured in low, respectful tones. And then the family saw her. Not all at once, one by one. Her aunt noticed first. She froze mid-sentence. Wineglass paused halfway to her lips. Ethan looked up next, brows knitting together in confusion. Their mother turned last. For a split second, the room tilted. Because Nora didn't look like someone who had struggled. She looked whole, not defiant, not guarded, not hardened, just calm. Her posture was different, her movements unhurried, her eyes steady. She wasn't scanning the room for approval or threat. She wasn't bracing. That alone unsettled them. Expectations collapse quietly. They had rehearsed scenarios without knowing it. Her mother expected tears. Her aunt expected tension. Ethan expected sarcasm. None of it came. Nora greeted them politely. "Hi," she said. "I'm sorry we're meeting like this." Her mother nodded stiffly. "Yes, it's good to see you. Good to see you. Not I missed you. Not I'm glad you came." Still negotiating power. They stood together awkwardly, like strangers sharing an elevator. Someone filled the silence with logistics, weather, traffic, the service schedule. Nora listened, responded, didn't lead, and slowly, something strange began to happen. No one stepped into the role she used to fill. No one managed the energy. No one smoothed the edges. No one bridged the gaps. The family felt exposed. The moment they waited for. After the service, people gathered in a side room. Coffee, cookies, soft chairs. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. The private corner, the emotional opening, the chance to finally talk. Her mother approached cautiously. "Nora," she said, "do you want to sit for a minute?" Nora nodded. "Sure." They sat. Her mother folded her hands tightly in her lap. I know things haven't been easy," she began. Nora listened. Her face remained open, neutral. Her mother continued, "We didn't always handle things well. That was as far as it went. No apology, no ownership, just a soft acknowledgement wrapped in distance." Nora waited. Her mother looked up, searching for something. Anger, relief, reassurance. Nora offered none of it. Finally, her mother asked the question she'd been holding for years. "Are you happy?" Nora considered it. "Yes," she said simply. The word landed heavier than any accusation. Her mother's eyes filled, not with tears, but with something like loss. "Oh," she said. That was it. The truth without performance. Later, Ethan cornered her near the refreshments. "So," he said, forcing a laugh, "guess you proved us wrong." Nora met his eyes. No triumph. No bitterness. "I didn't set out to prove anything," she replied. He frowned. "Then what was all this for?" Nora tilted her head slightly. "It wasn't for you." That answer left him speechless, because in his world actions existed to make statements, to win, to punish, to return. Nora's life had moved beyond that framework. Her aunt tried next. "You could have said something," she said quietly. "You disappeared." Nora nodded. "I needed space. You could have explained." "I explained for years," Nora replied calmly. "I just wasn't heard." Her aunt swallowed. There was no comeback for that. What they finally understood. The hardest realization came slowly, then all at once. Nora wasn't withholding herself to negotiate better treatment. She wasn't waiting for apologies. She wasn't holding a grudge. She had simply moved on. Her peace wasn't leverage. Her calm wasn't strategy. It was a settled state. And that terrified them, because anger can be argued with. Silence can be interpreted. Distance can be crossed. But indifference, the healthy kind, has no door handle. The end of the old story. As the afternoon wound down, people began leaving. Nora hugged her grandmother gently, exchanged polite goodbyes, thanked the hosts. Her mother walked her to the door. "I'm glad you came," she said again, quieter this time. Nora smiled, not sadly, not warmly, just honestly. I am too. They stood there for a moment longer. Her mother seemed to want to say something more, something that might change things, but the words didn't come. Because the truth had finally settled in, Nora didn't need closure from them. She already had it. Leaving without collapse. As Nora walked to her car, she felt no rush of emotion, no release, no ache, no victory, just confirmation. She sat behind the wheel, took a breath, and realized something profound. Nothing had happened. No confrontation, no explosion, no reconciliation. And yet, everything had changed. Because the family had finally seen her as she was now. Not the fixer, not the mediator, not the safety net. Just a woman who had built a life that didn't require their permission. They would spend months replaying that afternoon, searching for the moment they could have fixed things, the sentence they should have said, the apology that might have mattered. But some realizations come too late to repair anything, and the one that was about to break them was this. Nora hadn't walked away in anger. She had walked away in maturity, and maturity doesn't circle back. Kate moves forward, leaving consequences behind. The family didn't fall apart loudly. There were no dramatic phone calls, no final arguments that could be replayed and dissected. What followed the meeting was slower and far more damaging. It was erosion. In the weeks after the funeral, something shifted in the family's internal gravity. They kept functioning technically. Bills were paid. Birthdays passed. Conversations happened. But nothing held anymore. The silence Nora left behind didn't feel empty at first. It felt exposed. Like a room with the lights suddenly turned on, revealing cracks no one had wanted to see. At first, they blamed each other. Ethan accused their mother of being controlling. Their mother accused Ethan of being irresponsible. Their aunt accused both of them of being ungrateful. Arguments spiraled faster now, without Nora stepping in to translate, soften, or redirect. Every disagreement escalated because no one knew how to stop at hurt instead of jumping straight to attack. They all noticed the same thing separately. Conversations end badly now. Where they used to resolve things, even if unfairly, now they just stopped talking. Doors closed. Texts went unanswered. Assumptions hardened. And underneath it all, a thought none of them wanted to say out loud began to surface. She used to prevent this. One evening, Nora's mother sat alone at the dining table staring at a half-set place. She hadn't planned it consciously, but she had laid out one extra plate, out of habit. She noticed only when she went to clear the table. Her throat tightened. She remembered how Nora used to stay late after dinners, washing dishes while everyone else relaxed. How she'd listen patiently to complaints, smoothing over moments that would otherwise leave bruises. Her mother had told herself that Nora liked being helpful. Now, sitting alone, she understood the lie inside that belief. It hadn't been enjoyment, it had been expectation. And expectation, she realized too late, is not love. The regret didn't arrive as guilt. It arrived as inconvenience. Her mother struggled to keep track of appointments, missed one, paid a late fee, felt irritated, not at herself, but at the situation. Why is everything so complicated now? She almost reached for her phone again, almost. But the memory of Nora's calm voice at the funeral stopped her. I'm happy. The words echoed in her mind, unsettling in their simplicity. Nora hadn't sounded relieved. She'd sounded complete. And suddenly a terrifying thought formed. What if she's better without us? Without Nora to absorb pressure, the family began turning inward on itself. Ethan's failures were no longer cushioned. He faced consequences faster and harsher. No one intervened. No one reframed his mistakes. He grew resentful. Funny how everything's my fault now, he snapped one night. Their mother shot back. It's always been your responsibility. Nora just covered for you. The truth landed hard. Ethan stormed out. And for the first time, no one followed him. Their aunt was the first to say it plainly. They were sitting in the living room, tension thick in the air. She didn't leave to punish us, she said quietly. Their mother stiffened. What are you saying? I'm saying, the aunt continued, she left because she was done sacrificing herself. Silence followed. Uncomfortable, necessary. Their mother whispered, we didn't ask her to. No, the aunt replied, but we made it impossible not to. That sentence became a turning point, because it stripped away intent and left only impact. They hadn't meant to break her, but they had benefited from her breaking. Months passed. The family talked about Nora more openly now, but without confidence. The jokes were gone. The certainty that she'd come around had faded. One night, after a particularly ugly argument with Ethan, their mother sat at her kitchen table and typed a message. "I'm sorry." She stared at it for a long time. Then she deleted it. Not because she didn't mean it, but because she realized something painful. An apology doesn't heal damage if it's only sent to ease the sender. She didn't know how to apologize without expecting something in return, and that realization frightened her. There was no villain in the family's fall. That was the hardest part. No one could say, "This is your fault alone." The damage had been collective, subtle, accumulated. They had each taken something from Nora without asking, and convinced themselves it was normal. And now, without her, they were learning how heavy that had been. Nora didn't hear about any of this directly. She wasn't monitoring them. She wasn't waiting for collapse. Her life continued, quiet, full, intentional. She noticed the absence of drama more than the presence of peace, and that was the sign she had done the right thing. Because healing doesn't feel like victory. It feels like neutrality. The family's true fall wasn't financial or social. It was emotional. They lost the illusion that someone would always be there to catch what they dropped. They lost the comfort of unexamined dependence. They lost the right to say, "We did our best," without asking whether their best had been enough. And the truth they finally faced, too late to change anything, was this. Some doors don't close with anger. They close with maturity. And maturity doesn't argue. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't return to prove a point. It simply moves on, leaving people alone with the weight they once handed off. Nora didn't win because they lost. She won because she left whole. And while the family slowly unraveled under the weight of their own expectations, Nora's life moved forward, quietly, steadily, without witnesses, because the greatest victories don't demand to be seen. They only demand to be lived. Nora never marked the moment she won. There was no date circled on a calendar, no celebratory dinner, no inner monologue declaring triumph. If anything, the absence of markers was the point. Her life didn't pivot around proving anyone wrong. It revolved around becoming steady. And steadiness, she learned, is quiet. Her days settled into a rhythm that felt almost unremarkable from the outside and deeply grounding from within. Mornings began without urgency. She woke before her alarm more often than not, stretched, made coffee, and stood by the window for a minute before the day claimed her attention. No one needed her yet. No one was waiting for her to fix something. That freedom wasn't dramatic. It was breathable. Nora's work continued to grow, not because she chased recognition, but because she trusted her own pace. She took on projects that aligned with her values and declined the ones that echoed old patterns, anything that relied on emotional overextension disguised as opportunity. "I can't take that on," she'd say calmly. No, when no was enough. Yes, only when it felt clean. People respected that. More than that, they adapted to it. She discovered a truth that would have shocked the old version of herself. Boundaries don't push the right people away. They orient them. Her apartment reflected the same philosophy. Nothing extravagant, nothing performative. Just space designed for rest, focus, and presence. Plants by the window, books she actually read, a chair she loved because it was comfortable, not impressive. She built a life that didn't require explanation. Occasionally memories surfaced, a holiday song in a grocery store, a dish she used to cook for everyone, a phrase someone said at work that echoed her mother's tone. When that happened, Nora didn't spiral. She acknowledged the memory, named the feeling, and let it pass. That, she realized, was the difference between healing and suppression. She wasn't pretending the past hadn't hurt. She was no longer organizing her present around it. The family no longer occupied mental space the way they once had, not because she'd forced herself to forget, but because her life had grown larger than the wound. There were moments, rare ones, when Nora imagined how the family might interpret her life now if they saw it. They'd look for signs of rebellion. They'd look for proof of bitterness. They'd look for an explanation that let them keep their story intact. They wouldn't find one. There was no revenge arc, no dramatic reinvention, no visible success meant to sting. Just a woman living calmly, competently, without waiting for approval that never came when it mattered. And that was the victory. Because nothing disarms expectation like indifference. Not the cold kind, but the healthy kind that comes from self-respect. One evening, after a long but satisfying day, Nora sat on her couch, scrolling through photos on her phone. Not old ones, recent ones. A hike she'd taken alone. A quiet cafe she'd discovered. A snapshot of her desk after finishing a project she was proud of. She smiled faintly. Then she noticed something that stopped her for a second. She hadn't checked her family's social media in months, not out of restraint, out of disinterest. That realization carried more weight than any confrontation ever could. She hadn't just moved on physically. She'd moved on psychologically. Nora used to measure herself by endurance, how much she could carry, how long she could last, how little she needed in return. Now, her metric was different. She measured her life by how often she felt calm, by how quickly she recovered from stress, by how rarely she needed to explain herself, by whether she felt like she belonged to herself, and she did. Once, months later, a message arrived from an unknown number. "This is your cousin. I heard you're doing well." Nora stared at it for a moment. She didn't feel anger, she didn't feel curiosity. She felt choice. She replied with one sentence, "I hope you are too." Then she put her phone down and went back to what she was doing. No follow-up, no reopening. That was enough. Nora didn't win because the family collapsed. She didn't win because they finally understood. She won because she no longer needed them to understand. Her peace wasn't conditional, her dignity wasn't reactive. Her happiness didn't depend on being validated by people who had mistaken her silence for weakness. She had learned the most difficult lesson of all. You don't owe access to people who only valued you when you were convenient. Nora never announced her victory. She didn't write it down, she didn't post it, she didn't revisit it, she lived it. And in the end, that was the most powerful response she could have given. Not a confrontation, not an explanation, not even forgiveness. Just a life that moved forward without looking back. Because some victories don't need to be seen, they just need to be real. There is a kind of ending that doesn't feel like an ending at all. No closing scene, no final conversation that ties everything into a neat bow. No justice delivered in a way the world can clap for. Nora's story ended the way most real transformations do, not with noise, but with alignment. She didn't wake up one morning suddenly healed. She didn't forgive everyone and feel lighter overnight. She didn't erase the past. What she did was simpler and far harder. She stopped arranging her life around people who only felt comfortable when she was shrinking. For most of her life, Nora's silence had been misread. They thought it meant compliance. They thought it meant weakness. They thought it meant she would always stay. They were wrong. Silence can mean many things: fear, submission, avoidance. But there is another kind of silence, the kind that comes after clarity. The kind that says, "I understand now and I'm done negotiating my worth." That was the silence Nora chose. Not the silence of someone who had nothing to say, but the silence of someone who had finally said everything that mattered to herself. People talk a lot about strength as something visible, standing up, calling out, exposing, confronting, and sometimes those things are necessary. But Nora learned a different truth. Dignity doesn't need an audience. Her power didn't come from proving anyone wrong. It came from no longer organizing her life around being right. She didn't win arguments. She exited systems. She didn't demand respect. She lived in a way that required it. She didn't punish anyone. She stopped making herself available to be used. And that changed everything. Freedom isn't dramatic. It doesn't always feel euphoric. Sometimes it feels quiet, neutral, ordinary. That's how you know it's real. Nora's freedom showed up in small moments. Not checking her phone for validation. Not rehearsing conversations in her head. Not feeling responsible for emotions that weren't hers. It showed up in how she rested, in how she said no, in how she chose peace over being understood. And slowly, without ceremony, she became someone who belonged to herself. Nora never went back to explain, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't need to. She understood something most people realize too late. Explanations are bridges, and not every place deserves a bridge back to you. She didn't return to reopen wounds. She didn't wait for apologies that came too late to matter. She didn't need closure from people who benefited from her lack of boundaries. Her closure came from consistency, from self-trust, from building a life that didn't collapse when others disapproved. This story isn't really about family, it's about roles, about what happens when someone is cast as the strong one, the reliable one, the one who can handle it, and how dangerous it is when love becomes conditional on endurance. If you recognize yourself in Nora, here is the truth no one tells you early enough. You are allowed to leave roles that are costing you your identity. You are allowed to choose peace over loyalty. You are allowed to grow without asking permission. You are allowed to stop explaining yourself. Walking away doesn't make you cruel. Staying when you're being erased does. Nora didn't disappear. She became unreachable to what no longer deserved access. She didn't burn bridges. She stopped crossing them alone. And the most important thing she learned, the thing that changed her life forever, was this. Some victories don't raise their voice. They don't announce themselves. They don't come back to prove anything. They simply move forward. Whole, intact, unapologetic. If this story felt familiar, ask yourself gently, where in your life are you being valued only for what you carry? Who benefits from your silence? And what would happen if you chose yourself, quietly, firmly, without drama? If you've ever felt like someone was waiting for you to fail, if you've ever been told you wouldn't last, if you've ever stayed too long because leaving felt selfish, you're not alone, and you're not wrong. Some of the strongest choices you'll ever make won't be understood by the people who needed you small. They don't have to be. Some revenge doesn't raise its voice. It simply moves on and never comes back. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and remember, your peace is not something you have to earn by suffering. You're allowed to walk away whole.